Hey everyone, thank you very much for tuning into this installment of the P2 podcast. You have myself and Bryce here, and we are going to talk new, fun, frightening to some topic, AI, and how it is influencing our world today, shaping our industry, the fitness industry. We have our own takes on it, and we look for your feedback and comments in the comment section. Because obviously it's a very interesting conversation. So the more the merrier. Welcome.
Let's go ahead and get this started.
Sure.
So I think we can both probably begin this just by talking about, for one, what AI even is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people think that they understand what it is, but being able to define what artificial intelligence, AI, actually is will really help inform some of our later conversations whenever we get into how it is applicable and being used in the fitness industry now, and then how that will carry over into the future. So do you just want to briefly discuss what AI actually is?
Yeah, I don't we could get techie, obviously, and understand the complexities from AI, and like you mentioned earlier, just data loops or feedback loops. But I like movies. I like to use movies to illustrate certain things or things that are common in our culture. So there's a movie called AI, right? And then there's a Furby, right? And so Furbies were these things that were supposed to grow with us. The millennial kids know you could teach them to say things, and when the lights came on, their eyes opened, or you made noise, they started making noise. But those things were not learning, right? They had reactionary, data, right, to whatever they were receiving. So if some sort of outside stimulus happened, they had a programmed response that was already there, and it just kept happening and happening and happening, and it would enhance its response based on the stimulus it received, but it was not varying in any complexity based on the type of stimulus, right? Where you have what AI stands for, artificial intelligence, and my understanding of it, I like to kind of speak about it more in a high level view. This thing is actually learning. There are program models in here, but they can evolve with the more data that they consume, right? So if you think about your own life, right, as a baby, you are a pretty simple program. You eat, shit, and sleep. And you begin to get more and more complex with more data and more experience. And no one's necessarily telling you what you need to do. However, your parents do kind of shape your environment, which I think plays really well to the idea of training these AIs, these GPTs and stuff like that. But you do leave open a relatively revolving door for them to grow if you want your AI to grow, right? There are people who captive them and they want them to be very specific to their voice and their audience. But if you are looking for something like ChatGPT, for instance, it's pulling in sources from everywhere. So that is a revolving door of data that comes in every time something's published, every time there's a new research study done, every time there's a new celebrity thing that happens, it's pulling in all of that stuff, and it's using that to color its feedback that it gives you when answering your questions and your prompts.
So I'm going to actually take this not in a different direction, but kind of build off of what you said with the distinguishing between something that is mechanical versus something that actually is, hate to say the word cognizant, but something that can learn, right? So do you know what a mechanical Turk is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a mechanical Turk is, it refers basically to, this would have been I think Ottoman Empire. It was a traveling circus, and they had this thing called a mechanical Turk. And basically what you did was, if I'm not misremembering, it played a game of chess or played a game against you or something like that. But it looked and it was like a machine. It was an inanimate object that was in front of you, and someone would sit down and they would play a game against it. And it was literally just a mechanical machine. And it blew people's minds. They're like, what the fuck, right? If this is it, let's say the 10th century, I don't even remember, right? I'm just making a lot of these numbers up. But people were it was like magic to them, But what it later was found out, there was someone under the table that was receiving signals, and then they were changing things around, right? So the mechanical Turk, the idea behind that is there's a front that makes it appear as if something magical is happening, some learning is happening, or some artificial intelligence is there, but underneath or behind the scenes, it's actually people pulling the strings, or there's a specific code that is saying, do this if this happens, right? It's literally codified, right? And I think that that's a big difference. So another one is the Jacquard loom. So the technical loom. So these looms basically work off of punch cards. So you put this gigantic deck of punch cards inside of this loom, and it reads them, and then that's how it creates a pattern whenever it does any kind of weaving of a rug or tapestry or something like that. So that was actually the first instance of like creating code for a machine, was the Jacquard loom. And then you get to someone like Charles Babbage, who actually started creating these machines that could operate off of standard operations. He created like the analytical engine. Well, yeah, it was like the analytical engine, I think, was like his actual like machine that was like the prototype of the computer. And then Ada Lovelace was the first programmer. She worked with Charles Babbage, and she created like these legitimate codes, these algorithms that these machines worked off of. And then even beyond that, you get to like the Turings, you get to the von Neumanns, you get to all of these people who really like pushed the field forward and started theorizing about what it would be like to remove the veil from a mechanical Turk, essentially, right? Saying, is it possible to breathe life into an inanimate object? And I think that's where we start getting into the idea of AI. AI is not a code. It's not meant to be a set code. It's meant to be something that can learn. But up until more recently, it pretty much all was just code. I mean, there were very rarely instances of true artificial intelligence. A lot of the time, it was just a large code base that had so much information in it that it had the appearance of being intelligent, just because it had a gigantic database that it could pull from. So if the database is large enough, think about Google. Google has a database that is trillions of entries, right? So if you query, how big is the moon, it searches its database and gives you the answer, or gives you, at least a reasonable way of you finding that answer. So everything is connected. That's not what an AI does. An AI literally is creating the equivalent of an artificial brain, right? So there are algorithms, there are equations, there is a lot of really, really wacky and wild shit that I don't understand, and even people that create AIs don't understand, which is another topic for another day. But what you do is you take all of this training data and you throw it into this package, throw it all into this neural net. And then after a lot of compute time and computing runs, you have this artificial intelligence. You have this thing that can learn and that can process and that can make connections, that doesn't just require a database of lookup, right? A lookup table. And that is what is unique. And actually, I do want to point out something that you mentioned. You did mention like, it can bring in news articles and stuff like that. So that's actually independent of the AI's data that it's trained on. So if it has access to the internet, it can do that. But once you train your AI, it's static at that time. So GPT-4 is like stuck in, 2022, unless it has access to the internet. Mm-hmm. Because once you cut off that training run, that's all the knowledge that it knows. And to create more knowledge, you have to do more runs and create GPT-5, right? So that's where it becomes a little bit weird. It can learn, but it's making connections off of data that it's already been trained on, if that makes any sense, right? But that's where data is so important with AI, because the more data that you have, the more connections that can possibly be made, which is essentially the better that your AI can be as well. Where the algorithms are so important. That's where having deeper neural nets is so important. There's a lot. It's a lot that goes into this stuff, right? But I think the important part there is understanding what the capabilities are now, what the capabilities are going to be in the future. The future part, obviously very uncertain. The only thing we can be certain about is it's going to get better.
Right.
So anyone who is comfortable in their job or comfortable with the abilities of AI right now, if they're limited, should not be very comfortable, because these things are not only getting better, they're getting better at an exponential rate. And that should be scary to pretty much everyone, right? Like, I'm a very techno optimistic person. Like, I'm very much like, dude, yeah, give me fucking machine overlords. I'm cool with it, right? But at the same time, if you're someone who has ever really looked into a lot of like the existential risk of what can happen if misaligned AI gets powerful enough, it's pretty fucking scary, right? Like, it's a very scary idea. And it's not just like the iRobot scenario. I mean, it's like turns the entire solar system, galaxy, universe into like, you know, fucking paper clips. Like, it's very scary shit. But at the same time, we don't have to worry about that today. So what we need to worry about today is like, how does this affect our life? And I think we can make this broad and talk for probably like 3 hours, or we can zoom in and make it a little bit more specific to fitness and health, which is kind of like where we want this conversation to go. So right now, like in your experience, Chris, like what do you think the limitations are for AI, like with specifically fitness, health, and those domains?
So I will back up a little bit, and I'll say that I position AI as elevated machinery at this point that is cognizant in its ability to evolve. But again, still only based on, like you said, its inputs, its training, right? So I think about the idea of automation and the way that the roaring 20s took off with the Industrial Revolution and all the different machines that we brought in. And the idea was hundreds of thousands of people were put out of work, but you still had the humans that were there for input, right? There's someone pressing the button, someone making sure that the machine doesn't break. And when it does break, they fix it. So the engineers and whatnot became very sought after. No longer needed someone to go out and till your, fucking farm. You had a machine for that, right? But you still needed the farmer. What we're approaching now is, you mentioned iRobot, to quote Will Smith in that movie, he says, "Oh, so now the robots are building the robots." Well, that's just fucking stupid, right? And but that's what we're getting to, right? The idea of going beyond just, hey, programmable automation, but automated automation, right? The idea that things can now say, hey, you know what? I can evolve, I can think, I can plan for the obsolescence of this and preempt that and make sure that I put this in position so that it is still ready to go, right? So I know that this machine is likely going to start breaking down here, so I can plan for any sort of risk aversion. Hey, we need to have planned maintenance here so it doesn't break here. Also, being able to take in a lot more data than the average human can, looking at a spreadsheet and say, hey, this is how much you should be ordering, right? Because you only sold this much last month. So now you don't have to intuit this or think about it. It's like, no, I can actually give you cold, hard facts and data based on streams and stuff like that. And then also a level of, like you said, just that level above code. It's not just spitting out numbers anymore. It's now telling you what to do with these numbers, right? It's giving you actionable items that kind of bring in a contextual and conceptual understanding of what's going on, which can be frightening to some, really cool to others. I think it's really cool. But again, it's all limited by the data. And I think that is the biggest limitation of AI right now, especially in the fitness space, is so much of it is data driven and it needs to come from you as the user. And I know, all of our coaches know, and if you're a coach listening, it's like pulling teeth to get really good data, like really good, accurate data from your clients, right? Whether it's a recall failure or it is level of embarrassment or they just don't think of it. Like, there are big things at play that limit how much we actually get without going through the experience with our clients. And we just learn a lot of that stuff just through interaction and through check-ins and stuff like that. So the thing that the machines will lack is that, okay, well, when they don't have enough data, is there intuition? Is there I'm going to err on this side of things here just to keep this person safe? Or is it just going to go, oh, you are a young, athletic, 20-year-old male, you should be doing this, right? It's like, it's not going to give you that context, and it's not going to have the ability to intuit what should be the next step, which is gained through like interpersonal communication and experience. I think that's the biggest limitation, which is why I think that AI shouldn't be something that is necessarily countered so much as it is integrated, right? Like, I think that people who are really smart, really good coaches, you can use and integrate AI into your business to allow you to help more people, but it's not to remove the hard work of actual coaching. The actual person-to-person component of the space has to exist, at least for right now. I don't see the way that is removed completely.
See, I think that there's a fundamental limitation right now with the capabilities of AI, and I think that it's the creativity. And I think that the creative potential is practically infinite, but there are instances where you can see a lot of like the trending towards the median that AI does, right? So whenever you ask it for a workout program, right? So, hey, like I am an advanced male, I want to train 5 times a week, I have knee issues, and I'm looking to get more muscular. If you give it that context, it will give you just this very generic workout, right? You say, oh, like, let me add a little bit here, let me change this, I also forgot to mention this. It will adjust it, spit out something new, but it'll still be pretty close to like the middle ground, right? It'll be pretty fucking average. What AI right now is not that good at is outlier type of connections and thinking. I mean, obviously it's not thinking anything, so the thinking part, but it's more so like the creative aspect, right? It's doing things that are on the edges, because humans can be very edge case, right? Like there are a lot of people who think very outside the box, and that is a gigantic limitation of AI right now, is it is purely inside the box in terms of its way of thinking. But I do think that a lot of that is with how the sensors for these publicly available AIs work. If you're going to Gemini for Google, if you're going to ChatGPT for OpenAI, which is practically owned by Microsoft, you're not getting the full capabilities. They have to censor these things so down to the point where they don't offend anybody or say anything that could get someone in trouble or any of that. So they really handicap what these models are capable of doing. So that's why you get just this kind of sterilized version of everything, right? It all kind of sounds the same. Yeah, it's super useful in a lot of contexts, but they've really reduced its capabilities, which sucks, right? It sucks, but you also kind of understand, hey, these are large corporations. They have to protect their shareholders. They have to protect their stock price. Like they can't have this rogue AI saying ridiculous shit, like throwing up Nazi symbols and stuff like that. Like they have to be careful. And we just saw this with Google. They released Gemini. Their model is like Gemini 1.5, and they have been and are getting shit on.
They overcorrected.
Yeah, for censoring it too much in the opposite direction, right? Like they made it very politically correct, and they instilled Google's ideology into their AI, and that becomes problematic whenever people want a very uncensored and very neutral tool to use. If it's giving you some kind of biased reflection of the world, obviously people don't want to use that tool, and it becomes very problematic. But whenever it comes to using it for fitness, health, those types of things, I think the interpersonal communication is actually maybe one of the better things because of the chatbot interface, right? So you can talk to ChatGPT like a coach. Say, I want you to act like my coach. I'm going to give you context, and you give me your recommendations based off of, you know, the collective knowledge of fitness, health, aesthetics, strength, whatever, longevity, all those things. And it can do that. It can do that, right? It's not going to give you, again, like those outside the box answers. It's not going to think and create really, really unique ways of solving a problem. It can give you like statistical probabilities, right? But it's not really going to, as a first pass, give you something that is truly, truly unique or exciting. It's basically going to be sterilized. But I still think that the best way to utilize it right now is to just talk to the chatbot, right? because then it will get context. It will be able to ask you questions, and you'll be able to provide more context and more answers and more of what you're looking for from whatever you're trying to get out of it. So I do like it in that capacity, but I think if you're just going in and saying, hey, I want a program, I want a nutrition plan, I want you to tell me how to, get better sleep, or you can't use it as a coach right now because it doesn't have the memory capabilities to be able to like continuously add context over time and over time and over time.
Right.
But eventually it will, right? Eventually it will. Eventually you'll be able to integrate something like GPT-4 into like Trainerize, and it will be able to parse all of your historical information, everything you've ever said, every checkbox you've ever clicked, every data point you've ever entered, every time it gives you an answer. It will be able to just run through all of that and say, cool, I'm now up to speed. This is what I recommend based off of your historical data, which no human coach would ever be able to do. So it really is, it's all about trade-offs, right? Like, do you want to have a conversation with someone who you can look at and see their body language and understand their tone and like feel that empathy? Or do you potentially want a tool that will be very objective in every recommendation it's giving you and potentially see things that a human would not be able to see? Because again, like we are very limited in our information processing. Like, we're stretched thin, we have very limited time, we're always multitasking. An AI isn't. An AI is only focused on you and your query at any given time. So there are a lot of benefits, but I think kind of what you mentioned there a second ago is, if you're a coach right now, and if you're not augmenting your coaching with AI, you are falling behind. If you are someone who is burying your head in the sand and refusing to augment your services, this isn't even coaching, right? If you're anyone who's refusing to augment yourself, your productivity, your capabilities by using AI, you're going to fall behind. If you're someone who just says, hey, like, this will never happen to me, you're going to fall behind. So it's incredibly important that people get familiar with using these tools and understand their benefits, their limitations, what they can do now, what they can potentially do in the future. But also, like what we talked about, I think a couple of weeks ago, is like, create a larger tool set for yourself. Like, learn different skills, but a gigantic skill to learn right now is just like how you will best use AI, because everyone's going to use it differently, but like how you can best use it for your own processes. Because if you can get a 10% productivity boost, like, that's gigantic when extrapolated out over the course of a year.
Yeah. So as you were talking, so I agree. I probably still vary a little bit on the interpersonal piece, mostly because I feel like it's just not close with what, if you're looking for an interpersonal reaction, it's not close yet, right? It's not close enough.
Yeah.
Right yet. And so to your point, a lot of the things I feel like you would ask it, it's like, hey, you could also Google some of these answers, right? Like, I want to get better sleep. It's like, okay, but the cool part about it is that it filters and tries to give you the culmination or surmised version of the best that it found. So you're not overwhelmed by this article saying this thing and that article saying that thing. As far as like it being used as a tool, so in ORs, right? So robots have been in the operating room for decades, and they're just getting more and more prominent and more advanced and sophisticated. So now you have doctors who are replacing knees or shoulders, and there's a full robot with a giant arm, and this robot has already been programmed with biometric scans of this person's full anatomy, their bone structure, density, the actual implant they're going to need. So there's no more random broaching of the bones, try to figure out how big of an implant you need. There's no more guesswork between trying to figure out how tall the implant needs to be to make sure it bridges the joint space just properly. It's there. It does all that work for you now. So now as the doctor, your job is no longer what it used to be, which was be a really good surgeon who can kind of intuit something. It's now, you need to know how to use this robot. Like, you need to know how to use this robot very well. And I do think I think the last piece of this will be the ethical part of it. But I do think surgeons will start to be removed a bit, because now you can start having people be, okay, well, instead of paying this person $500,000 a year, I can pay a technician $150 to come in here and operate this machine and do this surgery because the robot bulletproofs it. It's like, no, I'm better than a surgeon. You can get to a cut height, and as a surgeon, you can want to go, I think I need to go higher. It won't let you. It'll say, no, like this is the highest I will go. You'll have to go and override the machine and then log that override, because the companies trust the machine more than they trust you.
They should.
And
Like that's the thing,
yes,
though.
yes.
They absolutely should. And this is where you see stuff with like autopilot for pilots, like in airplanes. You see it for autopilot with automated cars or autonomous cars, or the future of autonomous cars. You see it with everything, drones replacing Amazon delivery people. Like, it is going to happen. A lot of the issue and holdup right now is this inability for a lot of people to accept that this is the future and that this is where things are going to go. It's not an ethical or moral issue. It's an economical issue. So this is what a lot of people fail to understand, but it's the reality. It absolutely is the reality. What you just said there about being in surgery, if we can reduce the cost of surgery from, let's say, a knee replacement from $30K to $1,000 by removing the surgeon, removing the nurses, removing everyone that has to be in that room.
Cutting down on the time. Time's a big piece, right? Like all the equipment you have to use, for how long you have to use it, because you're working with humans.
Yep. If you can take the humans out of the loop, and you can have essentially 1-2 people overseeing a robot that has a 99.9% accuracy rating on every single thing that they do, that makes everything cheaper. It makes it better. It makes it more standardized. It makes it more efficient. It reduces the insurance costs. Like, it's everything. And that all filters down to the end user. So for people who are upset about, delivery drivers' jobs being taken away, or taxi drivers, or pilots, or long distance truckers, whatever, right? It sucks if you're in those positions. It absolutely sucks. It's not fair. I get that, but it's not a decision that you or politicians can make. It is the end consumer makes those decisions. And if it is cheaper and better, that is where everything will flow. No matter how much people protest, no matter how much you whine, no matter how much legislation ties things up, eventually that's where it will go, because it's better and cheaper, and everything trends towards better and cheaper. So with that being said, I think we have to go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that when I mention moral and ethical,
no, I understand where you were going with it, but I do think that is, people argue from the moral or ethical perspective, and I think that that's flawed, because it's not like you can have moral or ethical quandaries with these things, but that's not what is going to influence the direction that this goes.
So I disagree, but I think I'm looking at the moral and ethical part differently, right? I see, so like for me, as a person who's like, yeah, you tell me that my surgery is gonna be much cheaper and a robot's gonna do it, a robot that has a much higher success rate, a lower infection rate than any of the surgeons in this hospital, I'm probably gonna be like, yes, sure. But what most people aren't thinking about, which is what I'm thinking about because I've seen this happen, is what happens when things go wrong. And that's where I think the moral tie comes in, because you can't go yell at the robot. You can't go like disembowel it and feel like, yeah, I got it back, right? Like, you can go sue the hospital. You can go sue the surgeon. And I think there's that moral accountability, right? If someone has their son in therapy and their therapist is a robot, right? It's an AI, just generated being that this child goes and sees, 3 times a week, and then their son kills themselves. Like, they'll be like, but you can't go after the robot because it's not, a thing, right? Which then gets into like AI rights and stuff like that, and getting into that space more and more and more.
Well, I think right now you're assuming sentience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not assuming sentience. I'm assuming that there will be a company that is overseeing the deployment of AI, robotics, whatever it is, right? So Tesla is overseeing the deployment of their autonomous taxis. Amazon is overseeing the deployment of their drones. Hospital X is overseeing the use of robot Y in these surgeries, right? So the company has to have insurance. And you can still, if something goes wrong, you can still sue the company. But they are going to have to pay for insurance for the inevitability that 0.01% of the time something's going to go wrong.
Right.
But the thing is that that percentage of the time is still going to be less frequent than a human.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I think that's the important thing to know. Yeah, like the instances where something does go wrong it'll be blown up, right? Just like how many people die every single day in car accidents? Like what, tens of thousands?
Yeah.
If someone dies in an accident where an autonomous car is involved, you hear about it for a week.
Yeah.
Right. But it's because it's shock value. It's because they want you to be scared of these things. I say they, but like the media understands that there is an implicit fear associated with autonomy, with robots, with AI. So they talk about them to like rile people up and get them scared that the robots are taking over. And if they get scared enough, then they appeal to their congressmen and they slow down legislature. They put regulations in place to slow down the proliferation of autonomous vehicles, those types of things. But then you have Tesla, who, for all intents and purposes, has a lot of the capabilities ready for autonomous driving, but they can't really use it. Same thing for Amazon. Amazon has drone fleets that they can deliver your packages fucking 15 minutes after you order it, but the FAA has so strict regulations in place that they can't fly over people's fucking houses, right? So a lot of this does come down to just over-regulation, but a lot of the over-regulation comes from just fear.
Yeah.
And it's like the iRobot type of fear, right? Where you watch movies or like Terminator, and there's not really a movie that you can look to say, oh yeah, like the AI was actually good. They didn't try and take over the world and kill everyone. Interesting. That's awesome. I mean, in iRobot, there was a good robot.
It's like a dichotomy. Well, there's like good robots and then a bad robot. And
exactly. So. But no, like I think that that's for me where there's in my mind like an inevitable march of progress. In a lot of the progress comes from technological improvements too. You talked about the Industrial Revolution. Before that, it was like, the agricultural revolution. And I guess in between that there was a scientific revolution, right? So revolutions happen and that pushes everyone forward. We're in the middle of a gigantic technological revolution right now, and it's going to be built off of robotics and artificial intelligence and everything that encompasses, right? Like the open internet and everything there. But, as personal trainers, as coaches, as dietitians, as accountability coaches, life coaches, therapists, whatever, right? Whatever you want to call it, you have to understand that if these tools become capable enough that they can almost replicate what you do, people will use them instead of you because it's not a quality thing. It's a pricing thing. It's economics. If ChatGPT costs $10 a month for a subscription and we cost $500 a month and ChatGPT can beat us basically at 90%, I don't expect that people are going to choose us over that tool. And I think that that is the mentality that a lot of people should have about these things, where it's, hey, if you use this and you augment your service, maybe that makes you 130% more capable than the chatbot on its own. And maybe that does make up the pricing difference between $500 a month and $10 a month for some people. But again, I don't think that we have to, or that we can assume this altruistic or like human-centric mode of thinking for a lot of people, especially whenever it comes to money, right? People want to save money. They want to feel like they're getting the better end of whatever value transfer is happening. And I think that is just a part of human nature, and that's never going to be filtered out or completely removed, no matter what ethical quandaries or moral quandaries start to pop up with like AI versus human. And a lot of times I think in the future, the AI aspect is going to be abstracted away. So, for example, I think in the future, you're going to have something like Vision Pro, where in the actual Vision Pro, whenever you're wearing it, you'll see a figure. And that figure will be your hologram of your AI. It might be your AI coach. It will talk to you. You will be able to talk to it. And you won't be able to tell the difference between what is real versus what is artificial. That's where I see this going. Some people are going to be like absolutely terrified by that. And I completely get it. But the thing is that you'll still do it because it's going to be cheaper and it's going to be a better experience. And you will, over time, get used to it. It will be normal.
It's the titration of it, right? It comes in.
It's a slow titration and normalization of these things where at first it's scary, then you get used to it, and then the Overton window shifts further and further and further, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, holy fuck, I'm speaking to my hologram personal trainer on my Vision Pro and I didn't even think twice about it, you know?
Right.
And I think that's really where a lot of this is going. Right now, it is very far from that. Very, very far. But I don't think that you have to be a computer scientist or fucking genius to see how fast this stuff is moving and understand that if you are someone who is comfortable in your position, or if you're a coach who's like, I'll never be replaced by AI because they can't do what I do. And like, you know, they can't be empathetic with my clients the way that I'm empathetic and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, I guess if that's the fort you want to build around yourself, you can continue to do that. But like, I would not feel very comfortable in that position.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like you said, there's a slow, sometimes faster, but a steady march in this direction. I actually, I'm going to triple down on, yes, these companies will carry insurance. I think humans are too primitive because I think when someone dies, right? Someone gets in a car accident that involves an autonomous car and someone dies, and then Tesla pays the family $500,000, right? I don't think that's enough for the family. I think as humans, we need our pound of flesh. And I think that's where there's the disconnect. Now, I agree. That's not going to stop it. That's not going to stop it. But I think that is a conversation that people kind of tiptoe around because it's not something that we as humans want to admit that, no, we actually just want another human to blame. I don't want to put the blame on a machine or entity of the machine, right? Oh yeah, sure. Like because it's like, okay, your video game malfunctioned and my family member died. Thanks for the money. But it's like, no, people want to see people jailed. They want to see their lives taken away. They want to see strong consequence happen when bad things happen. Which is why I wonder if like, okay, well, I don't know if surgeons and, like doctors, physicians will be eradicated, but maybe we'll just need less of them. Now you have more of like an overseer, doctor, surgeon, because people still want to go and say, no, I want his license. I don't want him practicing ever again, right? They still want to be able to go and do that, especially if something's egregious enough. And so that's where I see that, again, that like ethical, moral halt. Even if you like, again, a family member has a virtual trainer, right? You can't go like smashing their Apple Pro is not going to do it for you if, they somehow end up with some sort of like severe hormonal imbalance and now they're like fucked up for life, or they develop some sort of like chronic disease. Smashing a machine or suing Apple or whoever makes the software that the Apple device is using is not going to be enough for people. And so they'll want someone more in the front line of defense that they can go, no, I want to take your life away. I want something taken from you. But to your point, like you said, for all the coaches out there using it, that is the opportunity, right? You have that fear that's been mongered for you. You don't have to play into it. You can play off of it in the other direction and say, hey, listen, yeah, I'm not going to just like ship you off to this AI app. I do use it intelligently to allow me to give you more data, to analyze your data more fully, because like you said, I can't process all of this shit. So what it does is it processes all the data for me. It builds out your progression protocols. It builds out your nutrition protocols and recommendations for supplements. I then review them to make sure they make sense in the practicality. I take what I know about you and my own intuition and my experience with other individuals, and I use this data to now give you a top tier service, right? A service that you would maybe otherwise have to go and pay, you know, a hormonal specialist and get blood drawn and this and that and this and that. And like, I'm able to actually use all that biofeedback here, and you can pay me a lot less money, still more than what you'd pay the other coaches not using this. But, you know, you pay me more money because my service has been augmented and now I can help you more fully.
Yeah. And I think what it's going to start with is it's going to start with everyone having a choice. Everyone will have a choice between, do I want an AI coach? Do I want an augmented service with mostly AI, but like human oversight? Or do I want just a human coach? But understanding that there are gigantic price gaps between those different tiers, right? Where with AI, you might be able to pay $10 a month to get coaching and get real-time answers to your questions and get real-time programs and real-time, you know, like meal plans and all this shit, real-time adjustments.
Right.
Augment, because there is the aspect of human oversight, and humans are limited by time and resources and energy and attention and all that. It's going to cost more money. It's going to be a little bit slower. And then the full human tier is way more expensive and also way slower. So you have to understand like what the trade-offs you're making. And I'm a human. I'm speaking for these things because I think that the inevitability is that humans get pushed out of the loop and we become more managers rather than the actual like task doers and the manual laborers, right? We're overseeing what's going on and we're directing things in the correct way. We're putting infrastructure in place for people to be able to interact with these tools in a way that is seamless and, you know, good user experience and all of that. But I think that this should be an inevitable conclusion and progression that like we move away from like the monotony. I don't think that there's a reason for us to continue to want to toil away doing the same repetitive bullshit if we don't have to, right? We should all endeavor to be able to like move one level up in the chain, right? Because yeah, there are like the manual laborers, there are the managers, then there are like the business owners, right? And you want to be higher up in that hierarchy. It's more money, it's less dirty, it's less labor intensive, you know, you get to chill and air conditioning, like we want that. So I think the more that we can delegate to these systems, the better. And granted, a lot of it is going to come down to like what we talked about, where you have to be able to learn how to operate and work with these systems as an end user. You have to do the same. You have to understand like the right ways to ask questions, the right ways to get the best responses to your questions. But like my thought here is, you know, if we could fully integrate like a completely proprietary AI into everything that we do and have it permeate our entire business, if we could do that tomorrow, I would do it 100%. And I would tell all of our clients that we're doing it. And I would also say, hey, cool, that means that you only have to pay $10 a month as well. And I'm sure that everyone would be like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they'd be like, I'm cool with that. As long as like the standard of care and service doesn't fall through the fucking roof, I'm cool with it. Because you also say, oh yeah, by the way, you get instant responses. This isn't, you have to wait 2 days. Like with a human, it's difficult. Like we can't stay on top of all this shit. We just have too much going on. With an AI, you get literally instantaneous responses. And that is extremely valuable. And you're also being able to parse the entirety of human knowledge for your answers. And that's also obviously incredibly valuable, right? Like you or I can't hold the entire internet, our fucking brains.
Right.
And
soon, Neuralink.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm fucking hyped. I would be patient zero for that. But you know, like, again, I do want to emphasize strongly here that I am extremely techno optimistic. I am further out on that curve than most people I will probably encounter. And I understand that a lot of people are very hesitant for using and integrating these technologies into their daily life. But I also will say it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And whether you're going to do it willingly, whether you're going to be someone who is at the forefront, whether you're going to be kind of like that adventurer and go out into like lands unseen and just figure out what the fuck's happening, or if you're going to be dragged kicking and screaming after everybody else has already become comfortable with the technology. It doesn't matter, because that's just where things trend, right? You can lament how much you hate social media, but you still use social media, you know?
Right.
So all of these things I do think are very important. And yeah, this is one where we probably actually should do a part 2, to be honest, because I know that we're running low on time.
Should 100% do a part 2. I think that we'll probably just abridge this right here because I do have to go, but this was great. So I think what we're going to do is probably just plan maybe this next week. We'll go ahead and come back and do part 2 of this, because we have a lot more to say about this topic. Bryce and I, like you said, are very just tech people. I grew up on sci-fi, ICT, and very much in the space, very interested about what's going on and what's to come. But to all of those that did tune in today, thank you for tolerating our nerdiness. We appreciate you, and we will see you next time.